She was 5 feet tall and weighed barely 100 pounds. She had brown hair with blonde highlights and green eyes that people remembered long after meeting her. She was an honor student, a talented runner, a gifted singer. She was the youngest of 9 children, and everyone who knew her said the same thing about Molly Dattilo. She trusted people. She believed in the good in everyone. She thought the world was a safer place than it actually was. On July 6, 2004, 23-year-old Molly Dattilo left her brother's apartment in Indianapolis to drop off a job application at a Wendy's restaurant. It was 7 in the evening. She was excited about her future. She was weeks away from graduating college after 5 years of hard work. She had her whole life ahead of her. She made one phone call that night from a payphone at a gas station. And then she vanished. Her car was found abandoned in the parking lot of her apartment complex. Her cell phone was inside her brother's apartment. All of her belongings, her identification, her ATM card, her clothes, everything she owned was left behind. Molly herself was gone. No body has ever been found. No physical evidence has ever been discovered. No one has ever been charged with her disappearance. But in 2010, 6 years after she vanished, a civil court judge ruled that 2 men were responsible for her death. John Shelton and his father, Ed Shelton, were found civilly liable for Molly's wrongful death and ordered to pay $3.4 million to her family. Neither man showed up to court to defend themselves. John Shelton is currently in prison on unrelated charges. Ed Shelton's whereabouts are unknown, and Molly Dattilo is still missing. In 2017, 13 years after she disappeared, a judge officially declared her dead, but her body has never been recovered. Her family has never gotten closure, and the men who a court said killed her have never faced criminal charges. This is her story. This is the story of a young woman who believed people were good, who trusted the wrong person, and who paid for that trust with her life. This is the story of a case that should have been solved 20 years ago, but remains open, cold, and heartbreaking. Molly Laura Dattilo was born on March 14, 1981 in Madison, Indiana, a small town along the Ohio River in the southeastern part of the state. She was the youngest of 9 children born to Fred and Cherie Dattilo, and from the very beginning, she was special. Being the baby of such a large family meant Molly grew up surrounded by love, attention, and protection. She had 8 older siblings who adored her, who watched over her, who celebrated every milestone and accomplishment. She was the family's treasure, the youngest star in a constellation of 9. Madison, Indiana, was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where families went to church together on Sundays, where high school football games were community events, where people still left their doors unlocked at night. It was small, safe, comfortable. It was the kind of place where parents didn't worry too much when their kids were out playing, where trust was the default setting, where danger seemed like something that happened in big cities, not here. Molly thrived in that environment. She was an excellent student from elementary school through high school. She wasn't just smart, she was driven, disciplined, focused on her goals in a way that impressed her teachers and inspired her classmates. She was involved in everything. She ran track and cross country, and she was good at it, good enough to earn a college scholarship. She sang, and her voice was beautiful enough that she took private lessons and performed publicly. She volunteered in her community. She made friends easily because she had a gift that many people never develop. She genuinely liked people. She saw the best in them. She trusted them. Her family would later say that Molly's greatest strength was also her greatest vulnerability. She believed that most people were good at heart. She didn't see manipulation or danger until it was too late. She gave second chances, third chances, fourth chances to people who didn't deserve even one. She was trusting, and in 2004, that trust would get her killed.
You're watching Hidden Chronicles. More than just a channel, it's a community of truth seekers. Subscribe to stay informed, share to help others discover the truth, and join the discussion in the comments. Together, we uncover what's hidden.
When Molly graduated from high school, she accepted a running scholarship to Eastern Kentucky University in Richmond, Kentucky, about 2.5 hours southeast of Indianapolis and just over an hour from her hometown of Madison. EKU was a Division I school with a strong athletics program, and Molly was thrilled to be part of it. She moved to campus, joined the cross-country team, and threw herself into both her academic and athletic pursuits with the same intensity she had shown in high school. She was a communications major, and she excelled in her classes. She was on track to graduate, fulfilling the promise she had made to her parents and to herself. But college wasn't just about running and studying for Molly. It was also about people. She made friends quickly on campus. She was social, outgoing, the kind of person who lit up a room when she walked in. She trusted her new friends completely. She believed in them. She helped them when they needed it. She listened when they had problems. She was, by every account, one of the kindest, most genuine people you could meet. Molly ran on the EKU cross-country team through 2003, when her athletic scholarship expired after 4 years. But she didn't quit school. She was so close to graduating, just a few classes away, and she was determined to finish. In the summer of 2004, Molly enrolled in summer classes at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, known as IUPUI, to accelerate her progress toward her degree. She moved back to Indiana temporarily to take those classes, staying at her brother's apartment in the Westlake Apartments complex on the west side of Indianapolis. The plan was simple: finish the summer session, complete her remaining requirements at EKU in the fall, and graduate by the end of the year. Everything was on track. Everything was going according to plan. Molly attended all of her summer classes at IUPUI. She never missed a session. She was taking private voice lessons as well, continuing to develop her singing talent. She was training for the upcoming cross-country season, running every day to stay in shape even though her scholarship had ended. She was applying for part-time jobs to earn some extra money. She was living her life, pursuing her dreams, planning her future. And then, on July 6, 2004, everything stopped. The day started normally enough. July 6th was a Tuesday. Molly spent part of the day with a man named John Shelton. John was someone Molly knew, someone she had spent time with before. The exact nature of their relationship has never been fully clarified in public reports. Some sources describe him as a friend. Others suggest there may have been a romantic element. What we know for certain is that Molly trusted John Shelton. She felt safe with him. She had no reason to believe he would hurt her. According to later statements, Molly and John spent time together during the day on July 6th. At some point that afternoon or early evening, Molly decided to go drop off a job application at a Wendy's restaurant. The Wendy's was located near 10th Street and Highway 465 on the west side of Indianapolis, not far from where she was staying at Westlake Apartments. This was a simple errand: drop off an application, maybe pick up a few things at the store, come home. She left the apartment around 7 p.m. She took her car but left her cell phone behind in her brother's apartment. In 2004, cell phones were not yet the essential lifeline they are today. Many people, especially college students, still used payphones regularly. Leaving your phone at home when you were just running a quick errand wasn't unusual. Molly drove to the Wendy's near 10th Street and Highway 465. She went inside. She dropped off her completed job application. Maybe she chatted with the manager. Maybe she asked when she might hear back. Maybe she felt good about her chances. We don't know. What we do know is that Molly left the Wendy's, got back in her car, and at some point between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m., something went terribly, horribly wrong. At approximately 11 p.m. on July 6th, Molly made a phone call from a payphone at a Thornton's gas station on Crawfordsville Road in Speedway, Indiana. Speedway is a small town completely surrounded by Indianapolis, located on the northwest side of the city. The gas station where Molly made that call was several miles away from both the Wendy's where she had dropped off her application and the Westlake Apartments where she was staying.
Why was Molly at that gas station? Who was she calling? What was happening that made her stop at a payphone instead of going home? Police were able to trace that call. Molly had called a friend. We don't know exactly what was said in that conversation, but we know it happened. We know Molly was alive at 11 p.m. on July 6, 2004. And after that phone call, Molly Dattilo was never seen or heard from again. Her car was found the next day in the parking lot of Westlake Apartments, the complex where her brother lived. It was parked, it was locked, and inside that car, police found Molly's purse, her wallet, her identification, her ATM card, her credit cards, all of her personal belongings, everything that she would need to function in the world, to prove who she was, to access money, to travel anywhere, was sitting in that car. But Molly was gone. When police searched her brother's apartment, they found Molly's cell phone inside. This was significant. It meant that at some point after leaving at 7 p.m., Molly had come back to the apartment. She had returned home. Her brother wasn't there when she came back, so she had let herself in, and at some point she had put her phone down inside the apartment. Then she left again. Why? Where was she going? Was she going to meet someone? Was someone waiting for her outside? Did someone call her on her brother's home phone or knock on the door and convince her to leave again? We don't know. What we do know is that Molly left the apartment a second time that night, and she never came back. Molly's brother was not immediately concerned when his sister didn't come home that night. According to reports, Molly had occasionally gone on impromptu short visits to friends in the past. She was social, she was spontaneous. If she ran into someone she knew and they invited her to hang out, she might go without calling to let anyone know, especially since she had left her cell phone at the apartment and wouldn't have an easy way to make a call. So when Molly didn't come home on the night of July 6th, her brother assumed she was with friends and would be back the next day. But the next day came and Molly still wasn't home. July 7th passed. No Molly, no phone call, no explanation. Now her brother was starting to worry. But he still wasn't in full panic mode. Maybe she had decided to stay another night with whoever she was visiting. Maybe she had driven back to Madison to see her parents and hadn't thought to let him know. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But by July 8th, 2 days after Molly was last seen, her brother knew something was wrong. Molly wouldn't go 2 full days without any contact. She wouldn't disappear without telling anyone. She was responsible. She was reliable. She had classes to attend at IUPUI. She had voice lessons scheduled. She wouldn't just blow those off without a word. On July 8th, Molly's brother reported her missing to the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. And that's when the nightmare began for the Dattilo family. Because when police started investigating Molly's disappearance, what they found was a young woman who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of dread that something terrible had happened to her. The initial police response to Molly's disappearance was, by most accounts, inadequate. This was 2004. The protocols for handling missing persons cases, especially missing adults, were not as developed as they are today. Police departments across the country often operated under outdated assumptions that adults who go missing have probably just left voluntarily, that they'll turn up in a few days, that there's no need to treat every disappearance as a potential crime. But Molly's case had red flags from the very beginning. She had left behind her identification, her money, her belongings. She had missed classes and appointments, which was completely out of character. Her family was adamant that she would never just leave without telling anyone. These were signs that something was seriously wrong. Yet, according to Molly's sister Celestra, when she traveled to Indianapolis a week after Molly disappeared, police still hadn't even gone to Molly's apartment to search it or collect evidence. A week, 7 days. In a potential abduction or murder case, the first 24 to 48 hours are absolutely critical. That's when the trail is hot, when witnesses' memories are fresh, when physical evidence hasn't been contaminated or destroyed, when there's still a chance of finding the victim alive. But in Molly's case, that critical window was allowed to close. Evidence that might have been in her apartment, that might have been in her car, that might have been somewhere in Indianapolis was lost. Witnesses who might have seen something forgot details as days turned into weeks, and whoever had taken Molly had all the time in the world to cover their tracks, to dispose of evidence, to create an alibi, to make sure she would never be found. The investigation eventually did move forward, but it was playing catch-up from the start. Police interviewed Molly's friends and family. They tried to reconstruct her movements on July 6th. They traced the phone call she had made from the Thornton's gas station. They searched the area around Westlake Apartments. They followed up on tips and leads as they came in. But they were operating in the dark, trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. One name kept coming up in the investigation: John Shelton. John was the last person known to have spent time with Molly on the day she disappeared. He admitted to police that he had been with Molly on July 6th, that they had gone out together. Years later, when a local news crew tracked him down, John told them on camera, quote, "I was the only person dumb enough to admit I was with Molly that night," end quote. That statement is chilling for what it implies. It suggests that there were other people who may have been involved in whatever happened to Molly, but who were smart enough not to talk to police. It suggests that John knew he had exposed himself to suspicion by being honest about his presence with Molly that day. And it raises the question, if other people were involved, who were they? And why have they never been identified? Police questioned John Shelton multiple times. They asked him to account for his whereabouts on July 6th and the days that followed. They asked him what he and Molly had done that day, where they had gone, what time he had last seen her. But John's statements were apparently inconsistent. Details didn't line up. His timeline didn't make sense. And crucially, police could never verify his alibi for the hours after Molly was last seen alive. John Shelton became the primary person of interest in Molly's disappearance. But being a person of interest is not the same as being charged with a crime. And without physical evidence, without a body, without witnesses who saw John commit a crime, police couldn't arrest him. The case stalled. Leads dried up. Tips stopped coming in. Molly's family was left in agonizing limbo, not knowing if their daughter and sister was alive or dead, not knowing where she was, not knowing if they would ever get answers.
But the Dattilo family refused to give up. They refused to let Molly's case fade into obscurity. They became advocates, activists, fighters for justice, not just for Molly, but for all missing persons. Molly's disappearance exposed serious flaws in how law enforcement handled missing persons cases in Indiana. The delayed response, the lack of urgency, the failure to treat adult disappearances as potentially criminal from the start. These systemic problems meant that valuable time was lost, evidence was lost, and lives were lost. The Dattilo family worked with Indiana state legislators to change the law. They pushed for reforms that would require police to take missing persons reports immediately, that would mandate certain investigative steps be taken within specific time frames, that would classify certain disappearances as high risk and trigger immediate action. In 2007, Indiana passed what became known as the Molly Dattilo Law. The law required law enforcement agencies to accept missing persons reports immediately, without any waiting period. It identified criteria for classifying missing persons as high risk, such as cases involving minors, people with medical conditions, or circumstances suggesting foul play. And it mandated that officers receive training on how to handle missing persons cases. The law was strengthened in 2013 with additional provisions and more specific requirements. State Representative Ed Clare, who was instrumental in passing the legislation, later said, quote, "You never rank laws, but the Molly Dattilo law has to be one of the top laws that has ever been passed in the legislature," end quote.
The law has helped countless families in Indiana get faster, more effective responses when their loved ones go missing. It has saved lives. It has brought people home. But for Molly's family, it was bittersweet. They had turned their grief and frustration into something that would help others, but it didn't bring Molly back. It didn't give them the answers they desperately needed. In 2010, 6 years after Molly disappeared, the Dattilo family made a decision. They filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit against John Shelton and his father, Ed Shelton. A civil lawsuit is different from a criminal case. In a criminal case, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt, and the defendant can be sentenced to prison if convicted. In a civil case, the burden of proof is lower, preponderance of the evidence, and the penalties are financial rather than criminal. The Dattilo family alleged in their lawsuit that John Shelton had committed battery against Molly, that he had caused her death, and that his father, Ed Shelton, had played a role in covering up the crime or disposing of evidence. They were not seeking justice in a criminal court where the standards of proof are higher and where police and prosecutors control whether charges are filed. They were seeking justice in a civil court where they, as plaintiffs, could present evidence and force the defendants to respond. The case went to court in Marion County, Indiana, in November of 2010. The Dattilo family presented their evidence. They called witnesses. They laid out their theory of what had happened to Molly. John Shelton and Ed Shelton did not show up. They did not appear in court to defend themselves against the allegations. They did not present any counter-evidence. They did not testify. They simply didn't show up. When a defendant fails to appear in a civil case and does not respond to the lawsuit, the court can issue what's called a default judgment. Essentially, the defendant loses by default because they forfeited their right to contest the claims against them. On November 15, 2010, Judge Gary Miller issued a default judgment in favor of the Dattilo family. The court found John Shelton and Ed Shelton civilly liable for Molly Dattilo's wrongful death. The court ordered them to pay $3,496,000 in damages to Molly's family. This was a huge moment for the Dattilo family. A court had officially recognized what they had believed for 6 years, that John Shelton had killed their daughter.
That he was responsible, that he should be held accountable. But the victory was hollow in many ways, because a civil judgment is just a piece of paper unless it can be enforced, and John and Ed Shelton had no intention of paying that judgment. John was already in prison on unrelated criminal charges. Ed's whereabouts were unknown. Neither man had assets that could be seized to satisfy the judgment. The Dattilo family would never see a single dollar of that $3.4 million. More importantly, a civil judgment doesn't put anyone in prison. It doesn't result in criminal charges. It doesn't compel anyone to tell the truth about what happened. John Shelton could have been found liable in civil court for causing Molly's death, but he was never criminally charged, never arrested for her murder, never made to stand trial in a criminal court where he could be sentenced to life in prison. Why not? Why, if a civil court found him responsible for Molly's death, didn't criminal charges follow? The answer lies in the burden of proof and the nature of the evidence. In a civil case, the plaintiff only needs to show that it's more likely than not that the defendant is responsible. 51% probability is enough to win. In a criminal case, the prosecution must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a much higher standard, somewhere around 95 to 99% certainty. Without Molly's body, without physical evidence tying John to a crime scene, without witnesses who saw him harm Molly, without a confession, prosecutors would have a very difficult time meeting that burden of proof in a criminal trial. They could present circumstantial evidence. They could show that John was the last person with Molly, that his statements were inconsistent, that he had a motive or opportunity. But a defense attorney would argue that circumstantial evidence isn't enough, that there's reasonable doubt, that John could be innocent, and juries are instructed that if they have reasonable doubt, they must acquit. Prosecutors likely made the calculation that they didn't have enough evidence to win a criminal conviction, and they chose not to file charges rather than risk losing at trial and giving John Shelton a legal shield against ever being tried again for the same crime. So John Shelton sits in an Indiana prison, serving time for other offenses, knowing that a court found him responsible for Molly Dattilo's death, but that he will likely never face criminal charges for it. Ed Shelton's whereabouts remain unknown. Some reports suggest he may have fled Indiana or even the country. He has never been located, never been questioned further, never been held accountable for whatever role he played. And Molly Dattilo remains missing. Her body has never been found, and her family lives every day without answers, without closure, without peace. In 2017, 13 years after Molly disappeared, the Dattilo family made another painful decision. They petitioned Jefferson Circuit Court to have Molly officially declared dead. Under Indiana law, a person can be declared legally dead after being missing for 7 years if there's sufficient evidence that they are deceased. The Dattilo family met that threshold. It had been 13 years. There had been no contact, no sightings, no evidence that Molly was alive anywhere. A civil court had already found that she had been killed. It was time to accept the legal reality of what they had known in their hearts for years. On September 20th, 2017, Judge Darrell Auxier signed an order declaring Molly Laura Dattilo legally dead as of July 6, 2004, the date of her disappearance. Molly's sister Celestra spoke to reporters after the decision. She said, quote, "We presume that she is dead at this point, so I do not feel that it is a way of giving up. Just because someone is legally dead does not mean that you will ever stop searching for them." End quote. The declaration allowed the family to settle Molly's affairs, to close accounts, to handle legal matters that had been in limbo for over a decade. But it also formalized what they had lost. Molly was gone. She wasn't coming home, and while they would never stop hoping that her body would be found, that they would be able to lay her to rest properly, they had to accept that she was no longer alive.
Molly would have been 36 years old in 2017. She should have been in the prime of her life. She should have graduated from Eastern Kentucky University, should have built a career, should have gotten married maybe, should have had children of her own. She should have been at family gatherings, celebrating birthdays and holidays, creating memories. Instead, she exists only in the memories of those who knew her, frozen in time at 23 years old, forever young, forever missing. Let's go back to July 6, 2004, and try to piece together what might have happened to Molly Dattilo based on what we know from the investigation, the civil trial, and public reports. This is not speculation for entertainment. This is a logical reconstruction based on facts. Molly spent part of the day with John Shelton. We know this because John admitted it. At some point in the late afternoon or early evening, Molly decided to go drop off a job application at Wendy's. Did she go alone, or did John go with her? We don't know. Molly left her brother's apartment at Westlake around 7 p.m. She went to the Wendy's near 10th Street and I-465. She dropped off her application. At some point, Molly returned to her brother's apartment. We know this because her cell phone was found inside the apartment, which means she came back and entered the apartment after having left earlier. Her brother wasn't home, so she would have let herself in. Why did she come back? Maybe she had forgotten something. Maybe she wanted to drop off the things she had bought while she was out. Maybe she came back expecting to stay in for the night, put her phone down, and then something happened that made her leave again. Here's where things get murky. At 11 p.m., 4 hours after she left the apartment, Molly made a phone call from a payphone at a gas station in Speedway, several miles away from both Westlake Apartments and the Wendy's. Why was she there? How did she get there? Was someone with her? The most logical explanation is that after Molly returned to the apartment, someone contacted her. Maybe someone called the apartment's landline. Maybe someone knocked on the door. Maybe someone convinced her to come out, to meet them somewhere, to go somewhere with them. Molly left the apartment a second time. She got in her car, and she drove or was driven to the Speedway area. Why would Molly go to Speedway? Was she meeting someone there? Was she being taken there against her will? Was she lost or confused? At 11 p.m., she made a call from a payphone. She called a friend. We don't know what was said in that conversation, but it's reasonable to assume that if Molly was in immediate danger, if she was being held against her will, she would have said something to her friend, would have asked for help, would have given some indication that she needed assistance. The fact that the friend apparently didn't call police or alert anyone suggests that Molly's phone call seemed relatively normal, or at least not alarming enough to raise red flags. Maybe Molly told her friend she was out with John or someone else and just wanted to check in. Maybe she said she would be home soon. Maybe she sounded fine. After that phone call, Molly disappeared. Her car ended up back at Westlake Apartments. Someone drove that car back to the apartment complex and parked it in the lot. Was it Molly? If Molly drove her car back to Westlake, then whatever happened to her happened at or near the apartment complex. Maybe she was grabbed in the parking lot. Maybe she went inside someone's apartment and never came out. Maybe she was killed there and her body was removed. Or was it someone else who drove Molly's car back? If John Shelton or someone else drove her car back to Westlake after she was dead or incapacitated, that would explain why the car was there, but Molly was not. It would mean that whoever killed Molly wanted to make it look like she had come home safely, to buy time before anyone realized she was missing, to throw off the investigation. Inside the car, police found Molly's purse with all her identification and money. Why would someone who had just murdered her leave those items in the car? Why not take the purse and dispose of it elsewhere to make it look like Molly had run away with her belongings?
The answer might be that whoever killed Molly wasn't thinking clearly, or wasn't trying to make it look like she had run away at all. They just wanted to get rid of her body and create confusion about what had happened. Or maybe they left the purse in the car because they knew that without Molly's body, without physical evidence, without witnesses, they would never be charged anyway. Here's what the Dattilo family believes happened based on the evidence they presented in the civil trial and statements they've made to the media over the years. They believe John Shelton killed Molly on the evening of July 6, 2004. They believe that after Molly came home to the apartment, John either called her or came to see her and convinced her to leave with him again. They believe he took her somewhere, possibly to his apartment or another location, where he assaulted her. Maybe it was a physical altercation. Maybe it was a sexual assault that turned violent. Maybe it was premeditated murder. They believe that John killed Molly, and then he called his father, Ed Shelton, for help. They believe Ed Shelton helped John dispose of Molly's body. That's why the civil lawsuit named both John and Ed as defendants. That's why the family believes Ed's role was critical in ensuring Molly was never found. Where is Molly's body? The Dattilo family and investigators have searched for years. Multiple organized searches have been conducted in areas around Indianapolis. Volunteers have combed through wooded areas, fields, abandoned properties. Cadaver dogs have been brought in. Ground-penetrating radar has been used in some locations. Nothing has been found. If John and Ed Shelton disposed of Molly's body, they did it well. Maybe she's buried somewhere remote, in a location that only they know. Maybe her remains were scattered to prevent identification. Maybe she's in a body of water, weighted down, her bones long since separated and lost. Maybe she's hidden in a place that's since been developed or altered, making her impossible to find now. Or maybe, and this is the darkest possibility, Molly's body was destroyed in a way that left no remains at all. This sounds impossible, but it's not. Bodies can be burned at high enough temperatures that very little is left. They can be dissolved in chemicals. They can be dismembered and scattered across such a wide area that the pieces are never connected. Without Molly's body, without physical evidence, the case remains unsolved from a criminal standpoint. But make no mistake, this case has been solved in every way that matters. A civil court heard the evidence and concluded that John Shelton killed Molly Dattilo. Molly's family knows who is responsible. Law enforcement knows who is responsible. The only thing missing is criminal accountability and a body. Molly Dattili's disappearance had an impact that extended far beyond her own case. Her story brought national attention to the issue of how missing persons cases are handled by law enforcement. It exposed the gaps in the system that allow people to vanish without adequate investigation, and it resulted in real, meaningful change. The Molly Dattilo law has helped hundreds, perhaps thousands of families in Indiana get faster responses and better investigations when their loved ones go missing. It has brought missing people home alive. It has helped solve cases that might otherwise have gone cold. It has saved lives. Molly's cousin Anna Eaglin was so affected by Molly's case and the struggle to find information about it that she co-founded a nonprofit organization called Uncovered. Uncovered is an online database that collects, organizes, and presents information about cold cases of murdered or missing people across the United States. The organization works with law enforcement, families, and the public to keep these cases in the spotlight and generate new leads. Anna told reporters that when she was trying to follow Molly's case over the years, information was scattered everywhere. News articles, police reports, family updates, social media posts, all in different places with different details and no central source of truth. She wanted to create something that would give families and investigators a single, comprehensive, up-to-date resource for each case. Uncovered now has information on more than 200,000 cold cases. It's become a vital tool for investigators and families searching for answers. And it exists, in large part, because of Molly Dattilo, because her disappearance inspired her cousin to make sure that other families wouldn't have to struggle the way the Dattilo family did.
Every year on July 6th, on the anniversary of Molly's disappearance, her family posts on social media. They share photos of Molly. They remind people that she's still missing. They ask anyone with information to come forward. They refuse to let her be forgotten. Every year on Molly's birthday, March 14th, they do the same. They celebrate the life she lived and mourn the years she never got to experience. Molly's sister, Celestra, has said that Molly's birthday is the hardest day of the year for the family. It's a reminder of time passing, of all the milestones Molly never reached, of a life cut short. In 2024, the 20th anniversary of Molly's disappearance, local media in Madison and Indianapolis ran stories remembering her case. Family and friends gathered to honor her memory. They released balloons. They told stories about the Molly they knew, the young woman who loved running and singing, who trusted people, who believed in the good in the world. They reminded the public that Molly's case is still open, that tips are still being accepted, that someone out there knows what happened to her, and they pleaded with that person or those people to finally do the right thing and come forward. 20 years is a long time to carry a secret. 20 years is a long time to live with the knowledge that you helped dispose of a young woman's body, that you helped a killer escape justice, that you left a family in agonizing limbo. 20 years is a long time for guilt to eat away at you. If you know something about what happened to Molly Dattilo, now is the time to speak. John Shelton is already in prison. He can't hurt you. Ed Shelton, wherever he is an old man now. The time for protecting them is long past. Molly deserves to be found. Her family deserves to bring her home, to bury her, to finally have closure. And you, if you're the person who knows something, you deserve to unburden yourself of this secret, to finally do the right thing, to help bring peace to a family that has suffered for 2 decades. Where is Molly Dattilo? That's the question that haunts everyone who knows her story. Her body is somewhere. Bodies don't just disappear. They don't cease to exist. Molly's remains are somewhere in Indiana, somewhere within a drivable distance of Indianapolis, somewhere that John and Ed Shelton had access to on July 6, 2004, or in the hours and days that followed. Is she in the woods off a rural highway, buried in a shallow grave that's been covered by 20 years of leaves and vegetation? Is she in an abandoned building that's since been demolished or renovated? Is she in a landfill, buried under tons of trash? Is she in White River, Eagle Creek Reservoir, or one of the many bodies of water around Indianapolis? Is she on private property, somewhere that hasn't been searched because police didn't have probable cause for a warrant? Is she in a place that seems so obvious that investigators overlooked it, assuming it would have been searched already? We don't know, but someone does. John Shelton knows. Ed Shelton knows. And possibly there are other people who know pieces of what happened, people who helped, people who were told, people who saw something and kept quiet. One of those people, one day, needs to talk, because Molly Dattilo deserves better than this. She deserves better than to be missing for 20 years, while the men responsible for her death face no criminal consequences. She deserves to be found. She deserves to come home. She deserves justice.
If you're watching this video, you're part of keeping Molly's memory alive. You're part of refusing to let her case be forgotten. You're part of the community of people who believe that every victim matters, that every family deserves answers, that justice delayed is not justice denied if we keep fighting for it. Share this video, talk about Molly's case, keep her name in the public consciousness, because the more people who know her story, the more pressure there is on John Shelton, on Ed Shelton, on anyone who knows anything to finally tell the truth. Molly Laura Dattilo was born on March 14, 1981. She was the youngest of 9 children. She was 5 feet tall with brown hair and green eyes. She was an honor student, a talented runner, a gifted singer. She trusted people. She believed in the good in everyone. On July 6, 2004, she dropped off a job application at a Wendy's restaurant in Indianapolis. She made a phone call from a payphone at 11 p.m. that night, and then she was gone. 20 years have passed. She has never been found. Her family has never gotten closure. The men responsible have never been criminally charged. But her story lives on. Her legacy lives on in the law that bears her name, in the organization her cousin founded, in the lives that have been saved because of the reforms her case inspired. Molly Dattilo mattered. She still matters, and we will not forget her.